And now it's time for our fifth category of the night. Apologetics is a discipline which seeks to defend the Christian faith at all costs, and it doesn't always do it super successfully. So, we're going to talk about some of the worst apologetic calls we've ever had this year. And to do that is my one and only ever real co host of the show, Puck.
Apologetics is the religious discipline of defending religious doctrines through systematic argumentation and discourse. Some of our callers should have looked up that definition before calling the show. The nominees in the category of worst apologetic caller are Kevin from Anti-Darwin.
Having to do with evolution, a great place to start is obviously Charles Darwin, but I wanted to sort of focus on his 1859 book, Origin of Species.
Hey, I'm going to stop you right there, Kevin. I think actually, despite what you might think, I actually think Charles Darwin is not a good place to start because evolution has been happening long before Charles Darwin's time. And we've evolved some of our own ideas about evolution since Charles Darwin's time. So Charles Darwin could have wrote that whole book and everything could have been wrong in it. But the facts that we know about today about evolution, we don't need that book at all to know. Okay, I gotta be honest.
Malcolm from God is an Eel.
For the show, and the note that a call screener has is great. You said that you believe that God is a species that looks like an eel or a snake, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fascinating. Yes. I want to hear why you think that.
Nick from Presuppositionalism.
Would be that the Christian God is the ground of all being. He's the ultimate context and that which is metaphysically primary for all secondary states, which would be like me and you and all other particulars.
I'll tell you right now, Nick, all three of those things mean absolutely nothing to me. And that's not saying anything about you. I'm just saying those terms by themselves, they just, I can't make heads or tails of that.
And the winner is Malcolm from God is an Eel.
Well, that's not. If you want to know what the truth is, I guess
what's the truth, Malcolm?
How would you find it? You know.
Well, yeah. I mean, if the truth about God, I don't know if I would go to language. I don't think that's the first thing I would go to if I want to know the truth about God. Well, you said you presented this theory that you believe God to be an eel or a snake-like creature because the words used to describe snakes and eels is similar to that of God in some languages, right?
Yes, particularly the older languages, like take Chinese, for example. If you say snake in Chinese, it sounds like you're about to say God in Chinese. You just need to add more syllables to it.
But why does
and the same thing with other languages?
Okay, but how does that make God a snake, though? Like, just because it sounds like it.
I said that it possibly looks like an eel or a snake. I didn't say that it was.
Okay, I'm having trouble following here. Desh, what do you think about this?
With regards to Chinese language, I'm assuming you're talking about either, are we talking about Mandarin or Cantonese?
I don't speak Chinese. All I did was I used Google Translate. I translated for Chinese, Arabic, Latin, Finnish, a whole list of them.
So I assume it's Mandarin. Now, one thing you need to know about that particular language, it is tonality is incredibly important to that language. Mm-hmm. The same written word can have four meanings because they have four different tones. So you don't really. Again, I can't say I'm necessarily following where you're coming from. I feel as if you listen to linguists like John McWhorter, who talks about origins of language, we know that language is fundamentally man-made, and some languages have developed, as Dan pointed out, very similar wording. But the fact that you found a word that still requires an addition to make it sound like a snake, and then that can be derived as that's then somehow correlated to create the idea of God. Maybe you can give us another example. Is there another language that you found a similar piece of evidence?
Do you speak Arabic?
I don't speak Arabic, but again, another language with tonality is quite important. But again, so in Arabic, you're saying that the actual word for God is similar to snake?
In order to say eel in Arabic, you have to say Allah first.
Right.
Like
But you know that you know that the word Allah existed. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong here, but I believe the word predates Arabic as a coherent language.
Okay. I mean, because it's not just the languages for me, I just know that I could demonstrably prove that. And then, but I tied it into my interpretations. It could be subjective. It's a lens that nobody has looked through before, but the Tower of Babel could have screwed up the rest of the languages for all I know.
Oh, is that a belief that you hold, that the Tower of Babel was a real landmark?
I believe it's at least metaphorical. I think that in order to know that for sure, you'd have to hear the story first, like Kabbalah, and you have to be told the story in order to know that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was using some form of biosuit, neural link kind of technology.
That's interesting. That's an interesting idea, and I know that the Tower of Babel is a story a lot of people refer to make sense of why we have different languages. But people who've studied this stuff, the linguists that Desh is referring to, they've done a lot of work in actually tracing a lot of the origins of the languages that we speak today. We can really conclusively demonstrate that not only is language a man-made construct, but also that it arrived independently at different places at different times. So it doesn't seem to be that they all came from one place and then split off. We can actually kind of separate languages into different geographic regions of origin and not necessarily one specific place, which would kind of go against the idea that all languages were the same at one time and then just kind of randomly split.